Ever walked into a place and felt like you'd been there before? Hey, that eerie whisper in your soul. Hey, something deep inside saying, I know this place. Most people brush it off, call it coincidence. But what if it's not? What if these moments are fragments of a hidden past, echoes of lives you once lived, quietly bleeding into who you are today? Have you ever woken from a dream, your heart pounding, images of a life you never lived, clinging to your mind with haunting intensity? Or maybe you met someone new and an instant, powerful connection washed over you. A sense of familiarity so strong, it sent shivers down your spine. Hayes experiences happen to millions of people every day, yet we're taught to dismiss them as coincidence, tricks of the mind, random misfiring of neurons. But what if they're not random at all? Picture this: you're dreaming, and suddenly you're someone else entirely, living in a different time, speaking a language you've never learned. Your heart pounds as you wake up, these impossible memories clinging to your mind like morning fog. Sound familiar? Sarah, a 34-year-old teacher from Ohio, experienced this exact phenomenon. Night after night, she dreamed of being a young woman in 1940s London. She could smell the smoke from the bombings, feel the rough wool of her coat, hear the air raid sirens with terrifying clarity. The dreams were so vivid, so emotionally intense, that she began researching that era. What she discovered amazed her. Every detail from her dreams, the street names, the bomb shelter locations, even the rationing system, matched historical records perfectly. How could she know these things? She'd never been to London, never studied that period in detail. Yet somehow, the knowledge was there, waiting in the depths of her consciousness, like buried treasure. Across centuries, Buddhist masters have taught something revolutionary: who we think we are. It's just one ripple in a vast ocean of consciousness, shaped by countless lifetimes stretching far beyond what we can remember. But modern life makes us forget this truth. We rush from task to task, consumed by endless worries, barely pausing to wonder, where do these deep-seated fears come from? Those inexplicable talents, the strange longings that seem to have no source. Consider Marcus, a software engineer who's always been terrified of drowning, not just afraid, paralyzed with terror at the thought of deep water. Yet he's never had a bad swimming experience, never even been in a dangerous water situation. The fear made no logical sense. Heat. Ear. Until he began exploring the possibility that it might stem from another lifetime. Through meditation and past life regression, he uncovered memories of drowning in a shipwreck. The terror that gripped him in that moment of death had followed him into this life. Understanding this connection didn't just explain his fear, it began to heal it. By recognizing the source, he could finally begin to let go of trauma that wasn't even from this lifetime. Tonight, we dive deep into these questions. We'll explore powerful signs that your soul has traveled this world many times before. Signs hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to recognize them. Long before modern psychology began studying consciousness, ancient Buddhist masters were mapping the territory of the mind across lifetimes. Their insights, preserved in texts thousands of years old, offer profound wisdom about the nature of existence. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes in detail what happens between death and rebirth, how consciousness navigates the bardo, the intermediate state between lives, how karmic patterns determine where we'll be reborn next. These aren't just philosophical concepts. They're practical maps for understanding the deeper currents that shape our lives. In the monasteries of Tibet, monks spend decades studying these teachings, learning to recognize the signs of past lives, training their minds to remember previous existences. They understand something most Western psychology is only beginning to grasp. Consciousness extends far beyond the boundaries of a single lifetime. Let's clear something up first. Many people imagine rebirth like a soul jumping neatly from one body to another, like switching cars. But Buddhist teachings reveal something much more subtle. The Buddha taught there's no eternal, unchanging self drifting between bodies. Instead, consciousness is a flowing, dynamic process, shaped by every thought, word, and deed across time. Think of it this way: karma acts like a current, guiding this stream of consciousness to new forms of existence. So it's not that you in the exact sense reincarnate. Rather, your mental imprints, your tendencies, unresolved patterns continue their journey. Buddhist masters use a beautiful image here, lighting one candle from another. The second flame isn't identical to the first, but there's a clear connection. One causes the other to arise. Just like that, our present consciousness springs from past causes. Nothing comes from nothing. This understanding transforms how we see ourselves and others. That person who irritates you for no apparent reason, you might have unfinished business from another lifetime. That skill you picked up effortlessly could be expertise developed over many incarnations. On the night of his enlightenment, the Buddha experienced countless past lives, not as abstract concepts, but as vivid memories. He saw himself born as humans of every class, as animals, even as beings in heavenly and hellish realms. He witnessed the intricate web of karma connecting each existence, how actions in one life create conditions for the next, how patterns of thought and behavior ripple across time like stones thrown into still water. Each life was linked by karma in an intricate web of cause and effect, a continuous process of becoming. This understanding wasn't meant to inspire fear, but to show the way to freedom. When you see clearly that every thought leaves a trace, you become empowered to transform your future. The Buddha taught that by understanding these patterns, we can break free from cycles of suffering. We can choose to plant seeds of wisdom and compassion instead of ignorance and hatred. For many, past lives sound like mythology, religious fantasy with no basis in fact. But scattered across the world are thousands of documented cases suggesting otherwise. The work began in the 1960s when Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, started investigating reports of children who remembered previous lives. What he discovered challenged everything mainstream science believed about consciousness and memory. Stevenson's approach was methodical, scientific. He didn't just collect stories, he verified them, cross-referenced historical records, interviewed witnesses, traveled to distant locations to check facts. Over 4 decades, he documented over 3,000 cases, each one carefully researched and catalogued. The patterns he found were remarkable. In many instances, children spoke languages they'd never heard. They recognized places and people with uncanny accuracy. Some bore birthmarks matching the fatal wounds of the person they seemed to remember being. Take the case of a boy in India who spoke fluent German despite never having heard the language. He described life in a German village, naming streets and buildings with perfect accuracy. When researchers investigated, they found records of a German soldier who died in that exact village during World War II. The boy's descriptions matched the soldier's life in every detail: his family, his occupation, even the circumstances of his death. These cases aren't isolated to one culture. From India to the United States, similar stories unfold. Toddlers waking screaming from nightmares of battlefields, little ones speaking of families in distant towns, children knowing skills they'd never been taught. The sheer consistency challenges our assumptions about consciousness and memory. Consider the case of James Leininger, a Louisiana boy who began having vivid nightmares about plane crashes at age 2. He described being trapped in a burning cockpit, screaming, "Plane on fire, little man can't get out." His parents were stunned when he identified his plane as a Corsair, named his aircraft carrier as the Natoma Bay, even recognized fellow pilots from old photos. The child knew technical details about WWI aircraft that would challenge aviation experts. He described the exact type of engine, the specific ammunition used, even the color of the life jackets. His parents were skeptical at first. They'd never discussed the war with him, never shown him military documentaries, yet somehow this knowledge was there. Historical research confirmed everything. A WWI pilot named James Huston Jr. had died exactly as the child described, at the precise location he pointed to on a map. Shot down over Iwo Jima on March 3, 1945. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Both named James, both pilots, both died in flames over the Pacific.
Dr.
Jim Tucker, Stevenson's successor at the University of Virginia, has gathered over 2,500 additional cases. Many children begin recalling memories between ages 2 and 4. Typically, these memories are most vivid around age 3, when language skills are developing but the rational mind hasn't yet learned to filter out impossible experiences. By around age 7, these memories usually fade, as if a door slowly closes between the current life and previous ones. These findings challenge the view that consciousness is merely a byproduct of the brain. Some scientists now speculate consciousness might exist at a quantum level, capable of surviving the death of the brain itself. Quantum physicist Dr. Stuart Hameroff has proposed that consciousness might be fundamental to the universe, not something produced by the brain, but something the brain accesses, like a radio tuning into a frequency. If true, this would explain how memories could survive bodily death, how information from one lifetime could bleed through into the next. Near-death experiences offer another piece of the puzzle. People who've been clinically dead and returned to life often report similar experiences, a sense of floating above their bodies, moving through a tunnel of light, reviewing their entire life in moments. These reports bear striking resemblance to Buddhist descriptions of the bardo, the transitional state between death and rebirth, where consciousness reviews past actions before moving on. Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, has collected thousands of these accounts. The consistency across cultures and backgrounds suggests something real is happening, something that challenges our basic assumptions about consciousness and death. Across cultures and centuries, certain patterns emerge. These signs could reveal that your soul has traveled this world many times before, each one a thread in the tapestry of your larger story. 1. Unexplained phobias that make no sense. You're terrified of deep water, but you've never had a bad swimming experience. Or you feel paralyzing fear of heights despite never falling. These instinctive reactions may be karmic imprints from how you died in a previous life. Ancient Tibetan texts describe how powerful emotions at the moment of death leave deep marks on consciousness. They reappear as phobias in a new body. Lisa, a marketing executive from Seattle, has always been terrified of house fires. Not just cautious, absolutely paralyzed with fear. She checks smoke detectors obsessively, won't even light candles. The fear has controlled her life for decades. Through past life regression, she uncovered memories of dying in a fire in 18th century London. The terror she felt in those final moments had followed her into this life. Understanding this connection helped her begin healing the trauma. 2. Recurring dreams where you're someone else. These aren't ordinary dreams. They're vivid, emotionally intense. You're wearing unfamiliar clothes, speaking a language you've never learned, living in a time or place you can't explain. Buddhist dream yoga practitioners teach these can be glimpses through the veil, separating your current identity from previous ones, especially when the same dream repeats with striking detail. Maria, a nurse from Mexico City, had recurring dreams of being a Native American woman. She could feel the beadwork on her dress, smell the sage burning in her dwelling, hear the specific dialect of her tribe. The dreams were so vivid she began researching Native American history. She discovered that every detail matched the life of the Lakota people in the 1800s, details she'd never encountered in books or movies. 3. Instant recognition of strangers. You meet someone and feel like you've known them forever, or you feel sudden, inexplicable aversion. This may reflect karmic relationships carried across lifetimes. Buddhist teachings describe how beings journey together through many rebirths, drawn by deep bonds of love, resentment, or unresolved karma. Sometimes these connections are positive. Love at first sight, instant friendship, a sense of coming home when you meet someone new. Other times they're challenging, inexplicable dislike, a sense of unfinished business, conflict that seems to have no source in your current interactions. Dr. Brian Weiss, a psychiatrist who studied past life regression for decades, has documented hundreds of cases where people recognized souls they'd known in previous lives, spouses who'd been lovers before, parents who'd been children, enemies who'd been friends. 4. Unlearned knowledge or unexpected talents. You picked up an instrument for the first time and played like you'd practiced for years. Or you understood a foreign language you'd never studied. Stories of prodigies may be more than genetic luck. They could be skills cultivated in past existences. Mozart composed symphonies at age 5. Picasso painted masterpieces as a child. These weren't just genetic gifts, they were souls expressing talents developed over many lifetimes. Consider the case of a young boy in India who could perform complex mathematical calculations in his head, numbers that would challenge computers. He'd never been taught advanced mathematics, yet somehow the knowledge was there. When asked how he knew these things, he simply said, "I remember." 5. Déjà vu that goes beyond fleeting familiarity. Feeling an overwhelming sense you've been somewhere before, especially when visiting a place for the first time. Buddhist texts suggest powerful experiences from past incarnations create energetic imprints. They resurface as intense déjà vu. True past life déjà vu is different from the common experience. It's not just feeling like you've been somewhere before, it's knowing specific details about a place you've never visited. David, a businessman from London, experienced this when visiting Rome for the first time. As he walked through the ancient streets, he knew exactly where each turn would lead. He could describe buildings before seeing them, point out historical details that surprised even local guides. The experience was so intense, he began researching Roman history. He discovered that every detail he'd remembered was historically accurate, as if he'd lived in Rome during the height of the empire. 6. Birthmarks or physical traits with strange connections. Dr. Stevenson documented cases where children's birthmarks matched wounds from the deaths of people they seemed to remember being. While not every birthmark is significant, the alignment of location, shape, and personal memories in some cases challenges our understanding. One of the most striking cases involved a boy in Turkey who was born with a malformed right ear. He claimed to remember being shot in that ear in a previous life. When researchers investigated, they found records of a man who died from a gunshot wound to the right ear in the exact location the boy described. The boy's birthmark matched the wound perfectly, both in location and shape. 7. Inexplicable attraction to particular cultures or eras. Feeling unreasonably drawn to ancient Egypt, medieval Japan, or a country you have no connection to. This pull can go beyond curiosity, manifesting as deep belonging or homecoming when you finally visit. Jennifer, a teacher from Canada, had always been obsessed with ancient Egypt. She learned hieroglyphics in her spare time, studied pharaohs and dynasties, felt an inexplicable connection to the culture. When she finally visited Egypt, the feeling of homecoming was overwhelming. She knew her way around temples she'd never seen, could read hieroglyphics that weren't in any guidebook. The experience convinced her she'd lived there in another lifetime. 8. Intense emotional reactions to historical events. You watch a documentary about a particular war or tragedy and feel overwhelming grief, as if you lived through it. These reactions might be your soul remembering experiences from another lifetime. The emotional response goes beyond empathy. It's personal, visceral, like reliving your own trauma. Robert, a mechanic from Texas, always became deeply emotional when reading about the American Civil War. Not just moved, devastated. He'd break down crying at battlefield photographs. The reaction was so intense, he avoided Civil War history entirely. Through past life regression, he uncovered memories of dying at Gettysburg. The grief he felt wasn't for strangers. It was for his own experience of that traumatic event. 9. Strange food preferences or aversions. You're inexplicably drawn to cuisine from a culture you weren't raised in, or you have strong aversions to foods common in your family. These preferences might reflect tastes developed in previous lives. Susan, raised in the American Midwest, had always craved spicy Indian food. As a child, she'd seek out curry and exotic spices. Her family thought it was strange. They were meat and potatoes people. The craving was so strong she learned to cook Indian food, traveled to India, felt completely at home with the cuisine and culture. She believes her soul remembers lifetimes lived in India. 10. Languages that feel familiar. Certain languages sound like home, even though you've never studied them. You pick up pronunciation easily, or understand more than you should. Your soul might be remembering a tongue once spoken fluently. This goes beyond having an ear for languages. It's about specific languages that resonate in your soul. Michael, an engineer from Germany, had always been drawn to Japanese. The sounds felt familiar, the structure made intuitive sense. He learned the language in record time, mastering subtleties that took other students years to understand. When he visited Japan, he felt like he was returning home. The culture, the customs, even the way people thought, it all felt natural, familiar. 11. Unusual reactions to certain time periods. Medieval music makes you cry. Victorian architecture feels like home, or you feel deep unease around specific historical periods. These reactions could be your consciousness remembering when you lived. The response is emotional, not intellectual. It's about feeling, not thinking. Patricia, a lawyer from Boston, had always been drawn to the Renaissance. The art, the music, the architecture, everything from that era spoke to her soul. She felt like she understood the period from the inside out. When she visited Florence, she walked through the streets with supernatural familiarity. She knew shortcuts that weren't on any map, could predict what lay around corners she'd never seen. The experience convinced her she'd lived there during the Renaissance. 12. Persistent fears that don't match your experience. You're terrified of drowning, but love swimming, or you fear abandonment, despite a loving family. These fears might stem from traumatic deaths or experiences in past lives. These fears are irrational. They don't match your current life experience, but they feel completely real. Dr. Weiss has documented countless cases where phobias dissolved once their past life origins were discovered. The fears weren't random, they were memories of real trauma from other lifetimes. 13. Feeling older than your years. People always comment on your old soul. You feel like you've lived through more than your age suggests. This wisdom might come from lifetimes of accumulated experience. Children who seem unusually mature for their age might be souls who've lived many lifetimes. Their wisdom comes from experience, not just intelligence. Tommy, a 6-year-old from Ohio, spoke like an adult. He had insights about life that amazed his parents. When asked where his wisdom came from, he simply said, "I've been here before." 14. Strange physical sensations in certain places. You get chills in ancient buildings, or you feel overwhelming sadness in battlefields. Your body might be responding to energy imprints from lives lived in those locations. These sensations are specific to certain places. Cut pleats, but pleats, but pleats, but pleats. Not general sensitivity. Particular locations that trigger your soul's memory. The battlefield at Gettysburg affects thousands of visitors this way. Many report feeling overwhelming sadness, hearing sounds of battle, sensing presences of soldiers who died there. 15. Recurring relationship patterns. You keep attracting the same type of people or situations. These patterns might reflect unresolved karma with souls you've known across multiple lifetimes. Until the lesson is learned, the pattern continues. Dr. Weiss calls these soul groups, clusters of souls who reincarnate together lifetime after lifetime, playing different roles, learning different lessons, but always connected by invisible threads of karma. Your difficult boss might have been your stern father in another life. Your best friend could have been your sibling for centuries. Your spouse might be a soul you've loved across multiple incarnations. Understanding these connections can transform relationships. When you recognize the deeper patterns, you can choose to heal old wounds instead of repeating them. The documented cases of past life memories number in the thousands, each one carefully researched and verified. These stories challenge our basic assumptions about consciousness, memory, and the nature of existence itself. The case of Shanti Devi remains one of the most compelling. Born in Delhi in the 1930s, at age 4, she began telling her parents about a life in Mathura. She described her husband, family, and home with astonishing precision. Her knowledge included details her current family couldn't have known, names of neighbors, specific landmarks, even hidden objects in the house she insisted had been hers. She spoke of her husband, Kedarnath, her son, Navneet, and her mother-in-law. She described her house in detail, the color of the walls, the arrangement of furniture, even where she'd hidden jewelry. When adults took her to Mathura, she navigated confidently, recognized her previous life's husband and son, pointed out house features exactly as they were. Everyone who witnessed it was stunned. She knew that her previous self had died in childbirth. She described the medical complications that led to her death. When doctors were consulted, they confirmed that her description matched exactly what would have happened in such cases. The case was investigated by a government committee. Their report confirmed that Shanti Devi had demonstrated knowledge she could not have acquired through normal means. Or consider the Thai girl who had intense panic attacks around knives. As she learned to speak, she described a violent death in a past life, named the village and circumstances of her murder. She spoke of being a market vendor who was killed by a customer in a dispute over money. She knew the name of the village, the layout of the market, even the type of knife used. Investigation revealed the story matched a woman who'd died decades earlier, in exactly the way the child described, down to wound locations. The child also had birthmarks corresponding to the stab wounds. The case was documented by Dr. Stevenson himself. He traveled to Thailand, interviewed witnesses, and verified the historical details. Everything the child had said was accurate. Western cases are equally compelling. A Scottish boy insisted he once lived on remote Barra Island, described a white house by the sea, a black and white dog, and the name Shane Robertson. He spoke of flying planes, watching them take off and land. He knew details about the island's geography, its weather patterns, even local customs. His family traveled to Barra. There they found a house matching his description, a dog of the breed he'd mentioned, historical records of a Robertson family living there decades before. Most remarkably, they discovered that the island had once been a Royal Air Force base. Planes had indeed taken off and landed there regularly. The boy's descriptions of aircraft were historically accurate. The boy's tears of recognition as he embraced the land moved even skeptics. Here was a child who'd never been to Scotland, yet knew intimate details about a remote island thousands of miles away. Modern neuroscience is beginning to offer insights into how past life memories might be stored and accessed. The brain, it turns out, is far more mysterious than we once believed. Dr. Penfield's famous experiments in the 1950s showed that electrical stimulation of the brain could trigger vivid memories. Patients would suddenly recall entire scenes from their past in perfect detail, complete with sounds, smells, and emotions. But here's what's interesting. Sometimes patients recalled events that hadn't happened to them, memories that belonged to someone else, as if the brain was accessing information from outside itself. Recent research into quantum consciousness suggests that memory might not be stored in the brain at all. Instead, the brain might be like a radio, tuning into information fields that exist beyond physical matter. Dr. Stuart Hameroff's work on quantum consciousness proposes that consciousness itself might be fundamental to the universe, not something produced by the brain, but something the brain accesses. If consciousness is quantum in nature, it could theoretically survive the death of the brain. Information patterns could persist in the quantum field, waiting to be accessed by a new brain tuned to the same frequency. This would explain how specific memories could transfer from one lifetime to another, how children could know details about lives they never lived, how skills and knowledge could carry forward across incarnations. The implications are staggering. If consciousness is truly quantum, then death is not the end, but a transition. The information that makes us who we are continues to exist, waiting to manifest in new form. Beyond the documented cases and scientific research lies another fascinating dimension of past life memories, how they manifest in our creative expressions and life choices. Artists, writers, and musicians throughout history have described sudden bursts of inspiration that felt like remembering rather than creating something new. Consider the case of Amadeus Mozart, whose father Leopold documented the child's extraordinary musical abilities. At age 3, Wolfgang was composing pieces of startling complexity. But what struck his father most wasn't just the technical skill, it was how Wolfgang seemed to remember the music rather than learn it, as if he was accessing a vast library of musical knowledge that already existed within him. This phenomenon extends beyond classical music. Jazz pianist Keith Jarrett describes entering trance-like states where his hands move across the keys, guided by something deeper than conscious thought. He speaks of accessing musical territories that feel ancient, familiar, as though he's channeling compositions from another time. Visual artists report similar experiences. Georgia O'Keeffe painted landscapes of New Mexico decades before she ever visited the American Southwest. When she finally arrived, she felt an overwhelming sense of homecoming. The red rocks, endless skies, and desert light matched perfectly the inner visions she'd been painting for years. These creative remembrances often carry emotional weight that transcends personal experience. Vincent van Gogh's paintings of wheat fields radiate a connection to agricultural life he never lived. His letters describe feeling ancient bonds to the earth, to cycles of planting and harvest that seemed encoded in his soul. The phenomenon appears in literature as well. Authors sometimes write about time periods or locations with uncanny accuracy, despite limited research or personal connection. They describe smells, textures, social dynamics with the intimacy of lived experience. Historical novelist Philippa Gregory speaks of walking through Tudor palaces and suddenly knowing where secret passages were located. Her novels contain details about daily life in 16th century England that historians later confirmed through obscure documents she'd never encountered. These creative channels may offer another pathway to past life memories. When we engage in artistic expression with openness and surrender, we might access deeper layers of consciousness where ancient experiences reside. The implications extend to career choices and life paths that seem to choose us rather than the reverse. How many people feel inexplicably drawn to specific professions, as if fulfilling a destiny rather than making a practical decision? Hall Dr. Helen Wambach, a psychologist who conducted past life regressions with over 1,000 subjects, discovered fascinating patterns in career connections. People who felt naturally drawn to healing work often recalled lifetimes as physicians, herbalists, or spiritual healers. Those with innate teaching abilities frequently remembered lives spent sharing knowledge. The connections weren't random. They suggested that souls might gravitate towards similar types of service across lifetimes, gradually developing expertise that transcends a single existence. This raises profound questions about talent and calling. Perhaps what we call natural ability is actually hard-won skill developed over multiple incarnations. The child prodigy who plays violin like an old master might literally be an old master, returning with accumulated centuries of practice. These insights also illuminate the concept of soul missions, purposes that transcend individual lifetimes. Some souls might specialize in healing, others in creativity, still others in leadership or service. Each lifetime offers opportunities to refine these gifts and use them for the greater good. Modern researchers have begun investigating these patterns more systematically. Dr. Carol Bowman's work with children's past life memories reveals that many young people recall specific roles or talents that manifest in their current interests. A child who remembers being a blacksmith shows unusual mechanical aptitude. Another who recalls life as a seamstress demonstrates exceptional skill with fabrics and design. These cases suggest that consciousness might retain not just memories but actual capacities developed through experience. Like muscle memory that survives the death of the body, these skills remain accessible to the continuing stream of awareness. The therapeutic implications are significant. Understanding past life connections to current abilities can help people overcome limiting beliefs about their potential. Someone who struggles with self-doubt about their artistic abilities might gain confidence by recognizing talents cultivated over lifetimes. It also offers hope for those facing challenges. A person with learning disabilities might have been a scholar in previous lives, temporarily experiencing limitations that serve other purposes in their soul's development. The difficulty becomes part of a larger story rather than a permanent limitation. Perhaps most importantly, recognizing these patterns cultivates humility about human achievement. No one succeeds entirely through individual effort. We all build upon foundations laid in experiences we can't consciously remember, supported by wisdom accumulated across time. This understanding naturally leads to gratitude for teachers who helped develop these abilities, for opportunities to express them, for the mysterious process that allows consciousness to grow and evolve across the apparent boundaries of death and birth. The journey of remembering past lives ultimately points toward a single recognition. We are far more than we appear to be in any single lifetime. We are ancient beings on a vast adventure of awakening, temporarily wearing the costume of personality and circumstance, but never limited by these temporary identities. In this light, every moment becomes an opportunity to honor the long journey that brought us here and to plant seeds of wisdom that will blossom in futures we can barely imagine. For many, past lives remain fascinating theory, but Buddhist masters teach anyone can glimpse memories hidden within their consciousness. With patience, openness, and the right approach, the key is understanding that these memories aren't stored in the conscious mind. They exist in deeper layers of awareness, in what Jung called the collective unconscious, in what Buddhists call the alaya consciousness. Accessing these memories requires quieting the chattering surface mind, learning to dive deeper into the ocean of consciousness, to touch the vast repository of experience that lies beneath everyday awareness. One powerful method is meditating on karmic patterns. Sit quietly where you feel safe, spine straight, breath steady. Allow your mind to settle until thoughts slow like silt in still water. When awareness grows calm, gently bring to mind a recurring dream, an unexplained fear, a place you feel drawn to without knowing why. Hold this image softly, without forcing answers. Ask yourself with sincere curiosity, when have I experienced this before? Don't expect dramatic visions immediately. Past life memories often emerge as subtle sensations, a wave of emotion, a sudden image, feeling of familiarity that can't be explained. The key is patience. These memories have been buried for decades, sometimes centuries. They won't surface just because you demand it, but with gentle persistence, they will begin to emerge. Another practice involves observing the transition between wakefulness and sleep. In Tibetan Buddhism, this threshold is considered a powerful gateway, similar to the bardo between death and rebirth. As you drift towards sleep, maintain thin awareness. Gently ask your mind to reveal glimpses of previous lives. Keep a journal beside your bed. Upon waking, write down any images, emotions, or fragments you recall. This practice takes time to develop, but many people report sudden flashes of memory, scenes from other times and places, faces they've never seen but somehow know. Guided past life regression can also help. This gentle hypnosis leads you into deep relaxation, inviting your subconscious to trace memories beyond your present lifetime. A skilled regression therapist can guide you through this process safely, help you access memories that might be too overwhelming to face alone. Dr. Weiss has trained thousands of therapists in these techniques. During regression, people often experience vivid memories of other lives. They see themselves in different bodies, different time periods. They feel the emotions of those lives, remember relationships and events with startling clarity. But here's what's important. Not all memories that surface are literal past lives. Some might be symbolic. Others might be collective memories from the human experience. The key is not to get attached to the stories, but to understand the patterns and lessons they reveal. Yet ancient teachings remind us, not all memories are meant to be uncovered. The Buddha taught certain experiences remain hidden for good reason. They might overwhelm or cause unnecessary suffering. If fear or confusion arises, pause. Trust your inner readiness. Sometimes the lesson isn't in remembering every detail, but understanding the pattern left behind. The goal isn't to become obsessed with past lives, but to use these insights to live more wisely in the present, to understand why certain patterns repeat, to heal old wounds, to develop greater compassion for yourself and others. For those who dare look beyond a single lifetime, past life memories offer profound transformation. They free us from patterns carried unknowingly, open hearts to deeper compassion spanning lifetimes. That unexplained fear of abandonment, the persistent unworthiness, conflict patterns repeating in relationships. These might not have begun with your childhood. They might have roots in experiences long forgotten by conscious mind, but etched into deeper awareness. Ifsi, or Abias thousands. Recognizing ancient origins gives you power to break cycles that have shaped you for lifetimes, turn pain into wisdom, transform suffering into freedom. Dr. Weiss has documented thousands of cases where understanding past life origins led to dramatic healing. Phobias that disappeared overnight, relationship patterns that shifted, chronic pain that suddenly resolved. The healing happens because you're addressing the root cause, not just the symptoms. You're healing wounds that may have festered for centuries. Remembering past lives also sheds light on soul connections. Ever met someone and felt instant bond, as if your souls recognized each other? These moments may be echoes of relationships carried across incarnations, unfinished stories of love, support, or lessons yet to be learned. Acknowledging these connections helps heal old wounds, build relationships based on understanding rather than unconscious baggage. For many, glimpses of past lives awaken profound humility. Realizing you've been rich and poor, strong and weak, noble and cruel across lifetimes dissolves rigid identities. It invites you to see others, not as fixed labels but as fellow travelers. You might have been the oppressor in one life, the oppressed in another, the teacher in one incarnation, the student in the next. This understanding naturally gives rise to compassion. How can you judge someone harshly when you've walked in their shoes? How can you hold on to anger when you understand that everyone is learning, everyone is growing, everyone is struggling with their own karmic inheritance? This perspective naturally gives rise to compassion, patience, desire to help rather than harm. Even death changes. If consciousness continues beyond this body, death loses finality. It becomes a doorway, transition to the next chapter rather than the end. Fear softens into acceptance. Grief transforms into gratitude. Understanding the continuity of consciousness doesn't make death less sad, but it does make it less terrifying, less final. You begin to see death as part of the natural cycle, like winter giving way to spring. This understanding can transform how you live. When you know that your actions have consequences reaching beyond this lifetime, you become more careful with your choices, more mindful of your impact on others. Most importantly, remembering past lives points to liberation. The Buddha taught that the cycle of birth and death, samsara, is marked by suffering. As long as we remain bound by ignorance and craving, but by seeing patterns repeating across lifetimes, we begin to understand how karma works, what binds us. With that insight, we can cultivate wisdom, compassion, and mindful action that lead to freedom, breaking the cycle at its root. The goal isn't to accumulate more lifetimes. The goal is to learn the lessons that free us from the need to keep returning, to develop such wisdom and compassion that we transcend the wheel of becoming. This is what the Buddha achieved, what countless masters throughout history have attained. The realization that suffering is optional, that freedom is possible, that liberation is our birthright. Meditation is one of the most powerful tools to cultivate this insight. By watching the mind with calm awareness, we see thoughts, feelings, sensations rise and fall, like waves on the ocean. We realize they're not who we are, but passing phenomena. This realization creates space to respond wisely instead of react blindly, to let go instead of cling, to forgive instead of hold grudges. Understanding our past lives can accelerate this process. By seeing patterns that repeat across lifetimes, we gain perspective. We learn that conditions we face now aren't random. They're opportunities to transform ancient tendencies. A moment of kindness today might untangle anger rooted in countless past experiences. A single act of generosity plants seeds of joy that blossom beyond this lifetime. The Buddha compared awakening to realizing a house you thought you were trapped in was never locked. The door has always been open. Stories of our past lives then aren't chains to bind us. They're mirrors showing where we've come from and how far we can go. They remind us that while we've wandered through countless existences, every moment offers the chance to wake up, to step off the wheel of samsara, to taste the peace of liberation. As we reach the end of this exploration, one truth shines clearly. You are more than the sum of your memories in this single life. Beneath stories of who you've been lies timeless awareness, vast, compassionate, unbreakable. Remembering past lives isn't about clinging to old identities. It's an invitation to see yourself and others with a wider lens, to live this life with greater purpose. Forgive more easily, love more deeply. Walk each step with awareness of the long, beautiful journey that led you here. Every echo from a past life, every unexplained longing, every sudden moment of recognition. These are quiet calls to remember your true nature, boundless, luminous, free. Let these memories, whether clear or fleeting, inspire you not to dwell in old patterns, but to create new ones rooted in wisdom and compassion. The countless lives you've lived, the lessons you've learned, the connections you've made, all shape who you are today, and with each breath, you have the power to choose love over fear, presence over distraction, liberation over the endless turning of samsara. You are never alone on this path. The awareness that has moved through countless forms continues to evolve, to awaken, to find peace. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's a beautiful teaching. The nature of mind is like the sky, vast, open, unchanging. Thoughts and emotions are like clouds, temporary visitors that come and go. Your past lives are like those clouds, temporary formations in the vast sky of consciousness. Important for the lessons they teach, but not your true identity. Your true identity is the sky itself. The awareness that has watched every lifetime unfold, the consciousness that remains untouched by the drama of birth and death. This awareness is what seeks liberation, what recognizes truth, what feels compassion for all beings trapped in the cycle of becoming. Remember, every moment offers the chance to step off the wheel of endless becoming, to taste the freedom that was within you all along. This is the highest purpose, to live with such wisdom and compassion that you no longer spin helplessly through birth and death, but instead find unshakable freedom, the freedom that is your birthright, the peace that is your true home. May you walk this path with courage. May your awareness bloom like a lotus rising above the waters of time, and may you find in every step the joy of coming home. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.